Hello, everyone. My name is Jordan, or IzzetFox, from the Unbanned podcast, and we're trying something a little bit different today. I'm doing sort of a interview or just sort of a focused episode, a side episode, with a guest. His name is Merchant Scroll Dude, or CrispyRice. Go ahead and introduce yourself.
Alright, hello everyone. My name is Juuso Kähkönen. That's a hard name to pronounce, but you can call me CrispyRice or Merchant Scroll Dude, as IzzetFox already said. I'm 23 years old. I'm from Helsinki, or I live here, and I work here and have studied here. What else? Well, I'm an avid combo player, so if there's a combo deck, I have most likely played the deck, and I love Storm decks in general, so if there's a format and Storm is legal, I'm most likely playing it, but overall, any sort of combo decks will do. If it's a complex combo like Storm, I'm in, so that's that. And then I'm also a Magic the Gathering content creator for our local game shop, Poromagia Oy. I highly recommend you check them out if you need any sort of Magic singles or whatever. And also I own a blog called Combo Gabels that focuses on different style of combo decks, but mostly Storm.
Yeah, so we're going to focus mostly on Modern Storm and just sort of go through where it's at in the meta right now, what Modern looks like currently, a couple of Crispy Rice's choices as far as cards, and kind of when you're changing a combo deck to make it your own and targeting certain things in the meta, how you can do that and things to keep in mind. Yeah, so let's start with Storm in general. Like, for people who don't know exactly how Storm works, let's go with the Modern version. How does Modern Storm work? What is the goal of the deck?
Well, I think where we need to start is actually take a look at what Storm is. So Storm is a triggered ability that functions on the stack. It appears on instants and sorceries. When you cast a card with Storm, you get to put a copy of it on the stack for every spell that's been played before it this turn. So basically, well, obviously this varies from format to format, but the basic idea is to generate a bunch of mana, draw a bunch of cards, sometimes untap your lands, keep doing that until you've cast enough spells, and then you fire off the Storm spell for the kill. The most classic one is Tendrils of Agony, but on Modern Storm we use a card called Grape Shot, which deals 1 damage to target creature or player, and then it has Storm, so you basically need to cast 19 spells plus the Grape Shot, and that's 20 for lethal.
Or in Modern, usually it's more like 17 because they usually fetch and shock on their first turn.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it makes it a little easier. So what does Modern look like currently, and how do you think Storm is positioned? Because Storm is kind of like Dredge. It's one of those decks that's always there, but it kind of falls in and out of favor depending on how much hate people are playing, it seems like, and where it's positioned. So how do you think it is right now?
I think Storm is in a decent position at the moment because we've seen a resurgence of like big mana decks, you know, especially in Magic Online where I play a lot. Like Tron is pretty relevant at the moment, and that's one of like the best matchups for Storm. Then like other big mana decks like Amulet Titan or Scapeshift style decks are showing up, and then like at the moment, like in general, like Urza decks are really popular because, well, I think the deck is very good, so it definitely deserves its spot on the spotlight, I guess you could say. So I think Storm is generally a good deck at the moment. It really preys on those big mana decks, and like I think Urza is also a pretty good matchup, at least game 1.
Yeah, and I think Storm's one of those decks that you can play in most metas. You can play different types of ways to stop your people playing hate against you.
About the hate cards, especially that I don't think, especially at the moment, there isn't like that much hate going for Storm. Like people are not, like graveyard hate is not that prevalent anymore, and I mean graveyard hate, in all honesty, it's not that good against Storm because they have so many sideboard cards to go around it. Like stuff like Damping Sphere is not very common at the moment, but like the Urza decks do play them, but you have cards to deal with those also.
Yeah, as far as playing through hate like Graveyard Hate or Damping Sphere, I really like Aria Flame. That card gave Storm a huge boost post-sideboard because just casting a couple spells a turn is enough to win the game once you drop that card.
Yeah, especially against Damping Sphere, I highly agree on that. And then against Graveyard Hate, you have Pieces of the Puzzle and Empty the Warrens also.
Yeah, exactly. So let's break down your build of Storm then. There's a couple of things that immediately jump out to me is the main board Factor Fiction and the main board Merchant Scroll. Why did you go with those two inclusions in your list?
Well, I can cover Merchant Scroll first because that's like my pet card. It's been in my list for a long, long time. Basically, ever since when they banned Gitaxian Probe and then Baral got printed in, is it like Ether Revolt or something?
Yeah.
Then I immediately started to tinker around with the list, and then I was having a hard time finding enough cards to play in the deck. And then I just stumbled, like literally just on the internet, stumbled on Merchant Scroll because I've played that card in High Tide decks in the past. So then I was like, wait, is this modern legal actually? And then I checked like, oh man, it's from 8th edition, so I guess it's legal. And at that time I actually played 2 Merchant Scrolls, but that was a bit too heavy for my liking, and then I just went down to 1, and it's basically ever since then it's been a part of my deck. And there are a couple of reasons going for it. I mean, it's a tutor, and like you don't get to play many tutor cards in Modern, and when you're a combo deck and you can play a tutor, like a cheap tutor card, I think you should play it. And 99% of the time it just gets you your gifts ungiven, but then there are scenarios where you need to like Merchant Scroll for your remand, or if they have like a main deck Leyline of Sanctity, you can Merchant Scroll for repeal to get rid of it, or Meddling Mage, or some type of that thing. It enables so many lines. You can also get remand to like set up Grapeshot remand Grapeshot lines if they have like Graveyard Hate main deck. All sorts of things.
And I feel like I should explain the term he just barely used, the Remand Grape Shot. So Remand, it returns a spell to its owner's hand. It counters it and returns it, and then you draw a card. So what you can do is you can use your Remand on your own Grape Shot to double the amount of damage that your Grape Shot does. Because you get to cast it a second time, and then the Storm effect goes again because it's a cast trigger.
Yeah, exactly. That's a very nice synergy, and it has gotten me out of many sticky situations. And as I'm going to cover, it can also find Factor Fiction. Like, it just gets you sort of like a toolbox sort of thing. You can get different things, and also, yeah, it just gets you access to many different cards for different situations.
Yeah, and that's somewhat how Legacy and Vintage Storm work as well. So it's taking a little bit from those decks because they play a lot of tutors like Burning Wish, and then in Vintage, just there's a ton of tutors you can use.
Yeah, like you don't really get to do those things in Modern, and now that you actually can, I think you should.
And since Blue-Red Storm in Modern it's usually referred as Gift Storm.
Yeah.
Because Gifts Ungiven is just so important to the deck. So a card that lets you pull gifts out of the deck or any other blue instant is just very, very good.
Yeah, exactly. Then regarding Factor Fiction, that was a very, very recent addition. I think I've been playing for maybe around 500, 600 matches with it on Magic Online, and it's been really, really impressive. I actually, yesterday I was playing in our like local Modern weekly event, and it was also pretty good there. It's mainly there for its additional value. It's another card that you can Merchant Scroll, and since one really good thing with the card is that because it doesn't target, it goes around Leyline of Sanctity. So if they like open with the Leyline of Sanctity, you can still like cast Factor Fiction and like start to, maybe going for some sort of Past in Flames lines or things like that. And then against some like grindy decks, against Jund, it's really good. It's just so much cards and value. And then against Control, it's just another instant speed threat that they kind of have to counter.
I am a big fan of Factor Fiction. I'm kind of sad that the card hasn't seen more play in Modern, but Modern just isn't really the format for it. So getting to play it in Storm is a lot of fun. It's a very, very skill-intensive card and a lot of fun to play.
Yeah, that's also one of the reasons. Like I've been playing with Factor Fiction. Like I played it with long time ago in the past, and it's just such a cool card. I mean, 4 mana in Modern is a lot at the moment, and that's, I think, going to remain true. But in Storm, it's fine, and most of the time it's a 3 mana spell with the cost reducers out, so I think it's fine as a one-off. I would not run more, personally, but as a one-off, it's great.
I've seen a couple people running it in the sideboard as well against grindy matchups or Thoughtseize decks. So I've seen it shine a little bit there, but I think one in the main board seems pretty good to me. I might have to try this out. So if we look at your sideboard, we've got like Abrades, we've got Dismember, Echoing Truths, Lightning Bolts. I think the thing that people struggle with the most when playing combo or building combo is figuring out which cards to sideboard or which cards they can replace and not break up their combo and not lose consistency. What would you say are good guidelines for like replacing cards in your main deck?
Oh yeah, that's a great question actually. A lot of people do struggle with that, and I've been actually getting a lot of questions about that because like you said, you can't dilute your deck too much. Generally what I sideboard like out are cards. Usually they are Gifts Ungiven, one copy of Past in Flames maybe, then remands if they are playing really like a fast deck where I just don't have time to remand, and then like sometimes you take out a ritual or two against control because you don't want to flood with them too much there, and then like if you have to, you can take a cantrip or two out, but you don't want to take out too many of those. And then against some matchups where your opponent plays lots of removal spells, I usually side out the creatures, so the Goblin Electromancers and the Barals, because then if your plan after sideboard is empty the Warrens and Aria of Flame, you don't really need the creatures, and then if your opponent keeps the removal spells in, they are like dead.
You know, you mentioned having your creatures removed. How about going off without an enabler? Because that's another thing that a lot of people, when they play Storm, can struggle with, is going off without an Electromancer or Baral down, which is very likely against a deck like Jund or Burn, where they just have a lot of removal.
Yeah, that's a great one also. It does require that you have quite a lot of lands. I would hope to have at least 4, but even like 6, 7 if you have time to set it up. And generally it has something to do with Desperate Ritual being spliced, because that generates you more mana than like, your regular Pyretic rituals. It also depends on how much or how big their life total is, but let's assume that you play Gifts Ungiven and you don't have a reducer or anything, because Past in Flames costs 5 mana from the graveyard, so you would need to have 7 mana generated after the Gifts Ungiven, so that you can flashback Past in Flames with 2 mana in your pool to start flashbacking everything back. So another thing that I would like to touch with Modern Storm is the basic lines on how you go off, like the basic lines with the cost reducer out. So I'll try to explain it in a simple fashion so that everyone will catch it. But the basic idea is that you have a cost reducer out, and let's assume that your opponent is not interacting. They have pressed the F6 button. So what you need when you cast Gifts Ungiven, you would need to have 3 mana floating, and at least one of that mana has to be red in order to be a deterministic kill, because when you resolve Gifts Ungiven with 3 mana in your pool, you will find Pyretic Ritual, Desperate Ritual, Manamorphose, and Past in Flames. So even at the, I don't know, I guess you could say the best or worst scenario, your opponent gives you like Manamorphose and Past in Flames. You play Manamorphose and it nets you 1 mana, so you go to 4 mana. Then you get to play Past in Flames and it only costs 3 mana. So you have 1 red left after the Past in Flames, and this lets you flash back all of your rituals and Manamorphoses, and once you flash back the gifts again, then you can just find a Grape Shot and like a Past in Flames and a 2 rituals, and then the storm count is like good enough. That's, I think, the simplest way of explaining how the Gifts Ungiven sort of works when you have like a deterministic kill.
That's one of the things that's hardest about Storm, is knowing when because not everything is going to be a deterministic kill where you're definitely going to be able to combo off. So sometimes I've run into situations where I'll go off once and take like half their health, and then a couple turns later, because we're just kind of having a staring contest or I'm not under pressure, I'll go off again. Or there's just sometimes when you think you can go for it and you have to weigh your chances of hitting the correct card with cantrips or with Manamorphose. So that's where the intricacies of Storm come in, and it's a very complicated deck. You can sink a lot of time into it and learning all these different lines.
Yeah, especially I think you said it the best. The fact that you need to know when to go off, based on what your opponent is playing, how much mana they have untapped, and all these different factors that you need to keep up you need to keep up with like all the time. Like you need to look at the board like, okay, they're on Jund. They have 2 mana open. Do they have like 2 1 mana removal spells, or do they have like 1 2 mana removal spells like Abrupt Decay or Assassin's Trophy? And like the ability to read the game and like, I don't know, get into your opponent's head and kind of figure out their hand, that's a big part of playing Storm. Like knowing how things will play out in advance, that it definitely gets you an edge.
Yeah, and just like with every deck in Magic, best way to increase your win rate is to have a game plan and know what you're doing on every turn, how you're advancing your game plan, and what your opponent might be doing to stop you.
Yeah, and that's one of the reasons that actually got me hooked on Storm combo in the first place, like many years ago, was that it's just such a complex deck. Even like I've been playing it for too long, basically. So I mean, it still gives me headaches. Like even yesterday when I went to play, I was still like hold on, I need to figure this out. Like what is happening? Like the learning curve is extremely high with the deck, I would say.
Kind of an odd question is, what do you think are the things in Storm or in combo decks in general that you should never do from a deck building perspective or sideboarding perspective? Like, what cards would you never take out in Storm, for instance?
That's a good one. Well, you never want to side out all copies of your Grape Shot. That much I do tell you. Because, well, then you can't really kill your opponent as effectively. Other cards I would never sideboard out. Yeah, Manamorphose. I never sideboard that card out. Never.
Yeah, Metamorphose is one of my favorite cards in Modern because it is just so good. Getting to fix your mana and in Storm sometimes gain a mana if you have an Enabler out and also draw a card is just insanely good. It's a free spell.
Yeah, I mean, and free spells are pretty busted, as we all know.
Yeah.
So yeah, I wouldn't touch like Manamorphose, but anything else you can like sideboard out to some degree, like the creatures, the gifts, one piff. Yeah, you always want to keep one Past in Flames in. I don't think there is a scenario where you want to take all of your piffs out.
I can definitely say I've fallen into the trap of sideboarding out both Past in Flames before. I learned that lesson the hard way.
Yeah. You had the other question too. Sorry, I missed it here. So it was about the cards that I don't sideboard out, and what was the other one? Sorry.
As far as deck building, if you're making a combo deck or you want to make changes to it, say you want to kind of make it your own or adapt it to a meta, like what sort of guidelines would you use for yourself? Obviously, you don't take out your finishers, but in the meta right now, what cards would you change to like fight Tron, or like Death Shadow's really popular right now, it seems like? What cards would you change or swap to fight those two decks?
Well, like against the big mana decks like Tron, like Remand is really good. I currently play 2, but you can make a case for 3. I've seen some lists even run 4 Remands. Some people just really like the card. I think it's definitely fine, but in a certain metagame it's not great. So if there are like a really lot of really fast decks like Dead Shadow and that sort of stuff, then you can play 1 Remand, you can play 2, you can even play 0, like if you really know the meta game. But generally speaking, when you're building combo, you don't want to touch your core combo. You don't want to touch those cards. Like the for example, my list only plays 10 cantrips, so 4 Serum Visions, 3 Opts, 3 Sleight of Hands, whereas many go with 12 cantrips, so 4 and 4 of each. So what I did to make room for like Merchant Scroll or Factor Fiction, I took out 1 Sleight of Hand and 1 Opt. So cantrips are one place, like you can take out 1 or 2 if you need to.
I think the basic idea is that if you want to play cards that are good against a specific deck, you want to play cards that sort of fit into your combo. In Storm, you want to play Instants and Sorceries if you can, because they can fight against specific decks, but also help you go off.
Yeah.
So I think that would be one rule to stick to.
Especially like Remand, it helps you protect your combo, it can stall out the opponent, and then it synergizes with the Grape Shot like we talked about. It does so many different things, and that's why it's a good card in Storm. But Storm in general is a combo deck that you don't get to like play too many interactive spells, because you need to dedicate a lot of your deck for the combo stuff, so you don't get to play as many interactive spells. That's just the nature of Storm, I would say.
Yeah, it's more of a linear deck for sure. You don't get to play too reactively.
Yep.
You want to be moving towards your combo and keeping your opponent under pressure and keep threading going off.
Yeah, exactly.
And then a personal question about you. What decks do you enjoy that aren't Storm or aren't like a combo deck?
Oh, so no combos.
Do you play any decks that are not combo?
I have in the past. This sounds super weird. Like all my friends who know me really well here in Helsinki, they're like, "What? Have you played something else than combo decks?" But yes, I have. I did play some years ago. I played like Black Green Rock with Phyrexian Obliterators. That was a pretty sweet deck. So it was like Jund without red, basically. I have like borrowed some random decks from friends in like playtesting, but in like tournaments, no, it's always been some type of combo deck.
So since you're on Moto, you obviously can play Vintage and Legacy. Do you dabble in Vintage and Legacy Storm at all?
Vintage, not that much. I could, but I haven't really had the time to look into it yet. In Legacy, yeah, I mostly play Tess, so the Epic Storm, which is basically the red build with Ride of Flames and Burning Wish and Empty the Warrens. That's always been more of a my style of deck. I have played the Ant, which is Ad Nauseam Tendrils. I have played that too, but TES, it's more my style of deck, and I enjoy playing that build more.
I've definitely been more drawn to the red base, the Burning Wish style of decks as well. It's also nice to just have your payoffs kind of hidden in your sideboard to go grab once you're ready to.
Yeah, exactly. Like naturally drawing the tendrils is not that useful, especially in Tess. So yeah, I like the wish package and the sort of flexibility it allows you to do.
What matchups or what meta would you not want to play Storm into? What are the bad matchups?
I really have like two decks that I absolutely despise playing against. Those are Burn and A-Track, and like Burn is the more common one of the two. The thing with Burn is that they are such a fast deck. They put you under tons of pressure very quickly. They have tons of removal spells for your creatures, so you can't just like run them out there. The biggest issue is Eidolon of the Great Revel, which deals 2 damage to a player whenever they cast a spell with converted mana cost 3 or less, I believe. So when your goal is to cast like approximately 20 spells, that kind of makes it impossible.
It's so many things against Burn that are bad for Storm. They're playing essentially a main board hate piece against you. They have cards that kill your creatures and also deal damage to you, and they're also a turn 3 deck, so they're constantly pressuring you, and you don't have any blockers really. Like you can block a Goblin Guide with an Electromancer, but in a Storm you really don't want to be doing that because that sets you back so far.
Yeah, and I mean Baral can block Goblin Guide successfully, but I mean they're not gonna let your creatures like stick. That's just not gonna happen.
Your Baral is getting hit by a Searing Blaze almost pretty much every game.
Yeah, as long as they have it, they will do it. And other thing I wanted to talk about Burn, which we actually tried with my buddies, was that when the especially Magic Online metagame was full of Burn, we came up with this, well, not so good sideboard plan that you board in, what's the 4 CMC thing that puts Platinum Empyrean into play? Madcap Experiment, right? So we played Madcap Experiment and then like 1 to 2 Platinum Empyreans, so you could like ritual into the Madcap Experiment quickly, and like Burn has a really tough time with Platinum Empyrean, because even if they have Eidolon, you can just keep playing spells because you can't go to 0 life. But the problem, even with that sideboard plan, like eventually came the fact that like then everybody knew that Storm had that card in their sideboard, so then it was just like, okay, let's say you lose game 1 most of the time, then you board that plan in game 2. Okay, you maybe steal game 2 with it, but then comes game 3, Burn like sideboards in Path to Exiles or Smash to Smithereens or Rakdos Charm, and then they'll just deal with the Platinum Empyrean, they'll just shrug it off, and then all your hard work came for nothing, so...
Yeah, I used to play Blue Moon with that combo in it, and that was the problem I ran into as well, is that if it catches a Path or a Assassin's Trophy or even just in a Braid, or in the case of Burn, a Smash the Smithereens, then yeah, you lose.
like it, even that sideboard plan didn't help enough. So then and also the problem with that plan is that it takes a ton of slots from your sideboard. It was like 3 to 4 madcaps, and then you usually want to run 2 platinum Empyreans, because if you draw the 1 Empyrean, then you can't madcap into it. So that is like roughly 5 to 6, 7 potentially cards, and Storm's sideboard is already so tight, like you can't afford to like take that many slots only to improve a matchup that you basically can't still win.
Actually, that brings up an interesting question about Modern in general that I think some people are kind of confused on. I see a lot of people trying to adapt their decks in Modern to fight specific decks or give themselves a better matchup. I feel like a lot of the time it's better to just take the fact that you have a bad matchup and hope to dodge it, and you get more points from focusing on winning your good matchups. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, I really agree with that, especially with a deck like Storm. Like when you're playing like these degenerate, stupid combo decks, you just have some matchups that you just are so weak against, and then but on the other side, there are the matchups that you just basically crush always. I really agree with you on that. You just accept it. Like I just accept that if I get paired against Burn, unless I get really lucky, I'll just lose. And like I'm not gonna get mad about it. It's just, part of Magic. There are good matchups, there are bad matchups, and you just sort of have to deal with it. There are like other decks that can be like tuned against specific decks or metagames, like, I don't know, Jund can be tuned very well.
Yeah, or Control.
Yeah, like those decks can adapt into like these different metagames and situations better because they have more slots in their deck that they can tune and change according to the metagame. But in combo decks, you don't have as much luxury with those sort of things. So if your metagame is really, really full of burn, I would not advise playing Storm in that sort of meta. It's just not a winning battle for you.
And that's definitely something to keep in mind when you're thinking about picking up a deck like Storm or picking up a combo deck in general, is that you need to keep a good mental state and keep in your head that you are going to lose some matchups to hate. You are going to have to learn how to play around people hating on your deck or bad matchups that you're just not going to win.
That's the price of playing a combo deck, I don't think there's much that can be done about that. And then I was going to talk about the other horrible matchup, which was A-Track. Thankfully, that deck is not very common, even on Magic Online or anywhere. But the problem with that matchup is that, well, they play a ton of discard. I mean, their deck is basically all discard, right?
Yeah, it literally is just discard.
Yeah, and I mean, even though like Storm is a graveyard-based combo deck, when they go like Inquisition, Thoughtseize, Liliana, then like small pucks, you lose your lands. And then like the Liliana ultimate will just finish you, or you just die to the Rax and Shrieking Afflictions. It's just like discard happens to be pretty good against combo, and that's just part of Storm's weakness, really. The main way, I mean, I think A-Track is better than Burn, but the main way you can beat A-Track is that like they don't get any sort of clock like Liliana or anything, and then you just play a bunch of land drops, and then you eventually like draw the Past in Flames, and when they have discarded all your cards, you just play Past in Flames and flash back everything and then kill them. It's not a hopeless matchup, but it's one of those matchups that I don't really enjoy playing if I'm on Storm.
I'm not a big fan of 8-Rack in general, playing against it anyway. I've not really messed with the deck, just because I get tired of decks that just sort of spin their wheels, and that's kind of 8-Rack as a deck, is they just want to keep you hellbent for as long as possible until they get their rack down.
Yeah, it's just painful to watch, You just sit there like, okay, I'm kind of dead, but I'm not dead, so I'm gonna have to keep playing this game.
Yeah, exactly. Any deck where I'm like, I know I'm dead, but I can't concede because I might top deck the answer, I hate those decks.
Yeah,
just
high five, I agree. Also, what I like to point out is that you have some tools against A-Track, especially with my build, because you have Factor Fiction, which is card advantage. A lot of people have shaved the number of pieces of the puzzle, but I still play 4. I think the card is absolutely bonkers, and I mean, pieces is in the sideboard to fight against these discard style decks. So when you get the board in 2 to 3 copies of Empty the Warrens, 4 copies of Pieces of the Puzzle, I mean, an Aria Flame, you're ready to grind after that.
Yeah, exactly. I love Pieces of the Puzzle just because it gets you so many cards, and I find when I'm starting to go off, Pieces of the Puzzle has a habit of finding another piece of the puzzle, which when you're going off and you just need like one more card or 1 or 2 more cards to actually win, it's perfect for that.
I think the logic with cutting pieces of the puzzle has been because it is in the sideboard solely to like beat these discard grindy decks with graveyard hate and such, because now many people play 4 copies of Aria of Flame, and that's like their way of ignoring graveyard hate so that they don't need pieces of the puzzle anymore. But I think pieces is very good. Like, you should run it. I'm not saying maybe you need to run 4, but that's just a personal thing. I hate discard spells so much that I just want to be able to load up and, stack up on cards when I need to.
Yeah, and if you're in a meta or if you're seeing a lot of decks like 8-Rack, Death Shadow, Jund, where there's a lot of Thoughtseize going around, I think that going up on Pieces of the Puzzle is a good idea.
Yeah, absolutely.
What's the craziest situation you've been able to combo through? I have one in mind for mine, but I wondered if you had one.
Oh man, I have a good one. Oh man, yeah. This brings cold chills down my spine, but it was so intensive. This was back in GB Bologna in 2016, I believe. It was during the Eldrazi winter. You most likely remember that.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and I made this horrible choice that I'm gonna play Storm in a field full of where everybody is like playing Chalice of the Void and turn 2 Thought-Knotsiers, and then there was this little me who chose, hey, I'm gonna play this Pyromancer Ascension Storm. And back in those days, Baral obviously didn't exist, and we had Gitaxian Probe still. So it was like the Pyromancer Ascension Goblin Electromancer build.
I've seen builds from back when Gitaxian Pro was legal. That card is an amazing card in Storm.
Yeah.
It's an amazing card in every deck, but especially in Storm.
So yeah, Treasure Cruise and those sorts of cards were gone, and I actually made day 2. I know it sounds crazy in that sort of... I mean, Storm was a horrible deck for that metagame, but I don't know, I didn't get paired against Eldrazi and I got lucky in the right spot, so it was day 2, yeah. And I was playing against, it was like a Grixis control deck, which is not a good matchup for Storm. But actually, when we played the game, he was actually like a Grixis Twin deck. And Splinter Twin was banned, but he had Kiki Chikis, and then Deceiver Exarch, and what's the other one? Pestamite. And I lost game 1 because he just had like multiple spell snares and discard spells, and then he just comboed me, and I was like, how can I win this? And I think, yeah, it was game 2. We had both mulliganed, and we had both kind of... It was a really, really drawn-out game. I remember I had 10 lands in play. That much I remember. And it was a turn before when I had Gitaxian probed my opponent, and I know he has Dispel, Remand Mana Leak in his hand, and he has mana to play them all. And... then I'm like, I go to my next turn, I draw, I have 8 cards in my hand, I don't have a land drop, and my hand was 5 rituals, I think it was a bolt, and grape shot, something along those lines. I don't have Electromancer, I don't have a Pyromancer Ascension, I don't have a Past in Flames in the graveyard, and then I go like super deep in the tank, like what am I supposed to do? I know he has those 4 counterspells in hand, and then I look at his life total, and I believe it was like 14 or 15, something along those lines. Sorry, I don't remember the exact number, but...
yeah, it's fine.
And then I'm like, okay, I don't want to go to discard. And then I counted up, and I was like, I'm 1 point short of killing him, like assuming that everything resolves. But then I get like this flash of insight. I'm like, wait a minute, he has those counterspells in hand. he's not gonna let everything resolve, right? And then I was like, well, ritual. And then my opponent goes super deep in the tank. He's like, what is going on? And then he's like, well, dispel it. I'm like, sure. Ritual again. Dispel it. Okay, ritual. Then he's like, mana leak it. Okay, I don't pay. Ritual, remand it. Then I have 2 mana left and 2 rituals left. Then I was like, well, ritual now is like, okay, ritual, bolt you, grape shot you for lethal because he fueled the storm count for me.
Oh my gosh, that is brilliant.
He was not pleased. He was just like, what happened? And he just scooped.
That's a very good example of keeping in mind that your opponent's spells also count for Storm.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
You can use them to win.
Yeah, and then we went to game 3, and then game 3 he kind of, I don't know if he was sort of tilted. He played kind of badly and lost, so I would say that's my favorite game of Storm ever.
I don't know that I can blame your opponent for being a little tilted
after
that. That's insane.
But yeah, you had a good memory too, so...
Yeah, I was playing a PTQ. It was actually in September, just a couple months ago, and it was one of the first times I played Storm in a tournament for a while because I was on IzzetPhoenix for like the last year because I loved that deck.
Yeah.
So I'm playing against a Jund player, and we're pretty far into the game. I can't remember my exact round count, but I know he'd been keeping his life total pretty high and just kind of controlling my board. But I finally managed to stick an enabler, and I'm going off, right?
Yeah.
And I get up to 17 Storm, which is his life total, so I cast the Grape Shot. In response, he drops Weather the Storm.
Ouch.
Which, for those who don't know, Weather the Storm is gain 3 life with Storm. So he then gains 3 times 18 life. And then I stop, just go completely cold because I think I've lost. And I remember I've still got mana, and I've got an Empty the Warrens in my hand. So then I dropped Empty the Warrens, and I forgot about a little bit of background for this. He kept a 1-land hand. So he's only on 2 he had just enough lands at this point to cast Weather the Storm. He hadn't been able to play anything. So I drop roughly 20 goblins on the field and then just finish him off by swinging for 3 turns in a row because he kept a 1-land hand.
Wow, that's insane too. Yeah. I mean, this is the thing with Storm, like it gives you these sorts of games, like especially in your scenario where you think like you've thrown the game away, you're like, yeah, I'm out of this game, and then you just figure out a line again and you just win. So
with that one, by the way, I'd like to bring up, he kept that hand almost certainly because he had the Weather the Storm in the hand.
Yeah.
When you are playing against combo, do not keep a terrible hand because you have hate.
Oh, yeah.
Don't keep a hand that's unplayable because you have hate. It won't win you the game.
Yeah, I've had those scenarios too, like I was playing against Boggles, and he kept a hand that had 2 Leyline of Sanctities, but no creature to put auras on. And then I was like, my opening hand was like a turn 3 kill with Echoing Truth. I was like, yeah, you keep those ley lines, buddy. You keep those ley lines.
That's the other nice thing about Storm is Echoing Truth is just such a sweet Swiss Army knife. Anytime I'm playing blue, I just kind of want to be playing Echoing Truth, just a one-of, just because it solves so many problems just by itself.
Yeah, especially in Storm, it's great. And also in my build, it's even better because you can Merchant Scroll for it. So that's also another one. Like the fact that you can get rid of multiple hate pieces with one go is just such an amazing feeling. And I mean, I think Repeal is great in the main deck because it cantrips and it can deal with like a cheaper things. But then Echoing Truth can deal with like the ley lines.
I think we'll wrap up here. It's been a great episode talking about Storm. If you like this style of content, you'd like to see more of it, I'd definitely be happy to make more of it. I can get Merchant Scroll Dude, CrispyRice back on to talk more about combo or other decks, or I can reach out to other creators. Just let me know on social media or in the comments. CrispyRice, shout out your stuff. Where can we find you?
Alright, so you can find me, on Facebook, but that's more private one, but you can also message me there, so it's Juuso Kähkönen. That's a hard name to pronounce again, I know. But the easiest way to find me is on Twitter, so Merchant Scroll Dude. That's the easiest way to get a hold of me, so you can just tweet me there, or you can just PM me right away. I'll try to answer when I can. And also on Discord, you can find me on CrispyRice. I'm on 2 different Storm servers. You can find me on both of them. You can DM me there directly too if you so wish. You can message me there. Those are the easiest way to catch me, I would say. And also, one thing I still like to mention is that I am going to start streaming at the start of January when I come back from the holidays. So definitely stick around for that. I will be putting it up on social media like on Facebook and Twitter and on Discord once I start streaming. So definitely join the fun and come watch me storm like crazy.
Lots of Storm being played. And yeah, I've been IzzetFox. You can find me on my Twitch, Twitter, and YouTube under that name. And this is the Unbanned podcast. We have a podcast. Catch us every week. We record every Sunday, upload on Monday. Thank you all for listening. You have a wonderful day.